Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Arunachala Ramanaya. Michael, I sent you a list of questions, and I was
Yes.
hoping, depending upon the time that you have, that we could probably go into some depth into them.
Right.
And, to the extent that we can cover, I would be grateful for that. So,
Right.
so I'm just going to read out the first question. And this pertains to, the destruction of the ego, the one ego, right?
Right.
And the one instrument, which is the mind, the one mind,
Yes.
for all living forms,
Mm.
and the impact of that on the world. So the question is this: the appearance and disappearance of the world through the ego, the one mind, that sees the the myriad forms, and is one of the instruments of the ego. Why is it that the awakening within a jnani, one jnani, or so many jnanis that have been on this planet since time immemorial, why is it that it hasn't destroyed this one mind for everyone in the illusion and dream? And the follow-up to that is, when will the world disappear completely for everyone in each one of these egoic forms? And do each one of us have to awaken independently?
Okay. To answer this adequately, we need to consider and clearly understand what Bhagavan means when he says there's one ego. This is best understood with the illustration of dream. In a dream, there are obviously many people in the dream, but there's only one dreamer.
Mhm.
The one dreamer dreams itself to be a person in the dream. So the dreamer is not the person we see ourselves to be in the dream, but we who are seeing ourselves as that person. In other words, the dreamer is ego.
Right.
Because we, ego, take ourselves to be a person, and we see so many people who appear to be just like us, we take every person to be an ego.
Mhm.
So there seem to be a multiplicity of egos. And in effect, so long as we're looking outwards, we have to act as if there are many egos, as if every person is an ego. Someone, because to all appearances, all the other people in this world, not only human people, but also other animals, who are also people, but just in different forms. Cows and dogs and cats and horses and elephants and all these creatures, they all seem to be operating this world in much the same way we are. They're seeing it through the five senses, perceiving it through the five senses, and they're operating this world. So there seem to be a multiplicity of jivas. But in whose view do all those many jivas appear? Those many egos, in whose view do they appear? They appear in the view of the one ego who is dreaming all this.
Right.
And as I say, the dreamer is not the person it seems to be. That is, we are dreaming, we mistake ourselves to be a person, but this person is part of the dream. So the person is not the dreamer, the ego is the dreamer. When ego wakes up from its dream, in other words, when we wake up from a dream, are we concerned about the people who remain in the dream? Or what about all our friends and our relatives in the dream? Have they also woken up?
No, we don't.
We don't, right. In exactly the same way, when we, the one ego, wake up, this dream world ceases to exist, and all the dream people in it cease to exist. So you've asked about jnanis. What do you mean by jnani? When people talk about jnanis, they generally talk about a person who they take to be, to use a modern term, self-realized. In other words, a person who has attained jnana. Such a jnani is a fiction. There is no such thing. That is, it is not any person who can, the person is jada. The person is just the 5 sheaves. And as Bhagavan says, all the 5 sheaves are jada. So the person cannot realize anything. The ego that mistakes itself to be that person also cannot realize anything, because that ego is a false awareness of ourself. We seem to be ego only when we're aware of ourselves as, I am this body, I am such and such a person. It may not always be the same person. In this dream, we dream ourselves to be Indira or Michael. In some other dream, we may dream ourselves to be some other person. We surely will dream ourselves to be some other person. But the ego that mistakes itself to be this person is the same. But ego cannot rise or stand without grasping the form of a body as itself. And body here means all the 5 sheaths. So in other words, the entire person. So since ego is a false awareness of ourself, as ego, we can never know ourselves as we actually are. Because when we know ourselves as we actually are, we cease to be ego. Right. So the jnani, as Bhagavan said, jnana me jnani. The jnana alone is the jnani. Because what does jnana mean? Jnana means pure awareness. Jnani means what knows pure awareness. What can know pure awareness other than pure awareness? Pure awareness cannot be known by anything other than itself, because it cannot be an object of awareness. So the jnani is not the person. The jnani is pure awareness. So that the jnana can never become a person. However, in the view of the ajnani, named the ego, the jnani appears to become a person, like the jnana which is ever shining in our heart as our own being, I am, is what has appeared outside in the name and form of Bhagavan in order to tell us the term within. So we say Bhagavan is a jnani, but we are taking the person Bhagavan seems to be the jnani. He is not that person. He is jnana itself. So he has appeared in the dream of the one ego in order to wake that one ego up.
Yes, so Michael, I understand that, but
part of the story of Bhagavan's life is that he, at the age of 16, he had a fear of death, and he was awakened. But that's all that is true only in our perspective.
Right.
So to say, oh, Bhagavan has woken up, why haven't we woken up, is meaningless. Because the Bhagavan who we say has woken up is actually ever awake. So it's not a matter of waking. It's we who are sleeping. We have to wake up. We are sleeping the sleep of Ajnana.
I'm still unclear, Michael, sorry. So my question is really related to the destruction of this one ego, right? If there is just this one ego that is pervading this world, and the awakening within one jnani, which I understand is just this, not a person, which is, jnana itself, which is one. Why is it there is no, so when you say that ego has been destroyed due to the awakening of that one jnani, what does that mean, right? What does that mean? Is because if there is just one ego, why does it rise again and dreams another dream into many forms? So I'm not getting that part of it.
I'll try and clarify some more.
Okay.
Awakening is meaningful only if you're asleep.
Right.
The jnani is eternally awake. So there's no such thing as a jnani awakening. Because the jnani is jnana itself, and jnana is eternally awake. What is asleep is ego. If this one ego wakes up, then it will be seen there never was any ego, never was any world, never was any multiplicity of jivas. Never was any jnanis or ajnanis. There is only jnana itself, and we are that. Sometimes Bhagavan used to say, when people love to talk about, speculate about, is this person a jnani, is that person a jnani? So sometimes when there was such talk in Bhagavan's hall, sometimes people would ask Bhagavan, is such and such a person a jnani? Thinking that Bhagavan can give a final verdict. And Bhagavan would often reply, there is only one jnani. You are that. See yourself.
And the appearance of the one jnani in this illusory world that we are in, right?
Yes.
To remind us to wake up.
But one jnani is not an appearance. You are the one jnani. Your own reality is that one jnani. That our own reality appears outside in the form of Bhagavan to tell us that the jnana we are seeking is within us. We ourselves are that. As he says in verse 13 of Ullidunaptu, Jnanamam tane me, oneself who is jnana alone is real. So there are no...
the awakening, so say for example, say if me as I experience myself as this ego currently, as this person that I take myself to be, and say if I awaken, then there is, I understand how that there is the cessation of the world, right? Completely for that.
Yes.
But then this, going back to your early question, is do you care about the others in the dream, right? So yes, I mean, I guess the dream doesn't exist once I wake up, and yet there seems to be the repetition of these dreams for the life forms, as we see in our so many reincarnations. I guess I'm still not being very clear about that, Michael.
You're still not thinking deeply enough about it. That is when it is said that you are the one ego who is dreaming all this. So everything you see, this world full of so many jnanis and ajnanis, all exist only in your view. So the multiplicity of ajnanis and the multiplicity of jnanis all will cease to exist when you wake up. You alone will remain. Not you as ego, but you as you always actually are.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, I guess I need to, get that model very deeply into. And I've heard you explain this so many times. So sorry, Michael. I still need to absorb that and fully understand that. Yes.
Yes. That is, Bhagavan's teachings are extremely simple. But in order to fully imbibe them, we need to be ready to wipe our mind clean, remove all our former ideas, preconceptions, and everything. And then only his teachings will make a deep impression on us. And we'll be able to view it from the perspective from which he is talking. For example, just take one verse of Ullidunaptu, verse 26. Ahande undayin anatum undahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahande indrail indru anatum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ahande yabamam. Ego itself is everything. Adalal yadu idu endru nadale ovadal yabamenaor. Therefore, know that investigating what it is giving up everything. That is, if we investigate ego, ego will cease to exist and everything else will cease to exist along with it. If we think about that carefully, that is an extremely radical teaching, and that answers this question of yours perfectly.
Okay.
That is, so long as we rise as ego, we as ego are obscuring the jnana, but alone exists. The jnana, but we actually are.
Okay.
So seeing others as jnanis is not seeing them as jnanis at all, because the jnani can never be other. The jnani is our own reality.
Okay. I think that is making it clear. Okay. All right. Thanks, Michael. I kind of want to
So
move on.
regarding the title you gave this question, the appearance and the disappearance of the world through the mind, the world appears when we rise as ego, disappears when we subside. As Bhagavan says in the last paragraph of Nana, Tan erandal sakalomerum. Tan adanginal sakalomadangam. Something to that effect.
Right,
If
which is
oneself,
similar to...
if what he refers to as oneself there is obviously ego. If oneself arises, everything arises. If oneself subsides, everything subsides.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael.
So there's only one problem. That one problem is ourself, ego.
Yeah.
And there's only one solution to this problem. We ourselves have a problem. We ourselves have a solution.
Right.
Seeing ourselves as anything other than pure awareness is the problem. Seeing ourselves as the pure awareness that we actually are is the solution. It's as simple as that.
Okay. I will reflect on that a little bit more. And I think I will. I think I will see the light of day for sure.
Right.
Thank you.
But to get clarity in all these things, we have to remember the real clarity cannot come from the words. The words point us in the right direction, but the real clarity can come only to the extent to which we look within. Because the original light, the light that illumines the mind, enabling the mind to see out, know everything else, that is the light of pure awareness that is always shining in our heart as our own being, I am. So by turning our attention within to face that, we are, so to speak, bathing ourselves in clarity. So the more we look within, the deeper we go within, the clearer all these things will become.
Sure. Yes, Michael. Okay, thank you. I have kind of want to move to the next question that has been unclear for me. And this is pertaining to both, vāsanās and samskaras, and what the essential difference is between them. So as I understand from Bhagavan's teachings and what you have been explaining, is that vāsanās are seeds of our former actions. So when they bear fruit and ripen, when they ripen and bear fruit, as in the case of the prarabdha karma, they dissipate through action. Is that correct?
Not quite.
Okay.
That is, vāsanas are the seeds. Those seeds are what give rise to action. That is, the seeds are the inclinations. They are the seeds that give rise to likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, which lead us to do actions. The actions then bear fruit. The
actions bear fruit. And the vāsanas, do they then dissipate through the action?
No.
Okay.
What dissipates, Bhagavan says very clearly in the second verse of Upadesha Indira, Vinayim vilevu vilevutru. That is the fruit of action perishing, passing away, ceasing. Vinayim vilevu vilevutru vittai. Vittai, vinay kadal vitidam. It's as seeds that we are thrown into the action. That is, it's the seeds that prompt us to do more and more actions. So when a fruit is, when the fruit of a past karma is experienced, it ceases to exist. But the seeds remain.
I see, right.
The seeds of the vāsanas, we need to understand the nature of the vāsanas to understand how to dissipate them. That is, the nature of vāsanas, they're our own inclination. Vāsanas have no strength of their own. They derive their strength from us. How they gain strength is the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular vāsana, the stronger that vāsana becomes.
And swaying means giving into them.
Yeah, allowing ourselves
to
be swayed by them, to be moved by them, to be
right.
so every movement of our mind is under the sway of Vishaya vasanas.
Right, right.
So
I'm trying to get
in order to avoid being swayed by any Vishaya vasana whatsoever, we have to cling to self-attentiveness. To the extent to which we cling to self-attentiveness, we are thereby not allowing ourselves to be swayed by Vishaya vasanas. So just as Vishaya vasanas gain their strength by us allowing ourselves to be swayed by them, they lose their strength by our not allowing ourselves to be swayed by them.
Right. So that eventual destruction is only through sustained self-attention.
Yes.
Right. So it's not, I mean, I was trying to get a simple metaphor that we experience in our day-to-day living. So for example, say if I have a vasana for chocolate, for example.
Yes.
And what you experience is, if you eat a lot of chocolate, right, and you say, hey, okay, at some point I'm done with it, right? So I experience the dissipation of that vasana over time. So hence my question about
it doesn't quite work. It doesn't quite work like that. That is, if you've got an inclination, that an inclination means a vasana. If you've got an inclination to eat chocolate, every time that inclination arises in your mind, you can either act on that inclination and eat chocolate, or you can refrain from acting on it. If you act on it, you are thereby strengthening the inclination. If every time a thought of chocolate comes to your mind, if you eat chocolate, that vasana is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. But you may reach a point where you find eating so much chocolate is making you sick.
Exactly.
So you also have an inclination to maintain your health and to feel well.
Right.
So when you find that this excessive eating of chocolate is making you sick and making you feel unwell, you get another vasana, another inclination to resist that. So there's been a battle between two inclinations.
Right.
On one hand, oh, just one more chocolate. Why not just one more now? And the other, no, let me not. So that is Bhagavan. When Bhagavan talks about vasanas in Nana, he says, Tondru Totu Varukindra Vishaya Vasanagal Kadalale Pol Alavakshavanai Erum, that is, though they rise like countless numbers, in countless numbers like ocean waves, they will all be destroyed as Swarupa Dhyana increases. So there he's saying they are constantly rising. Every movement of our mind is under the sway of Vishaya vasanas. So the vasanas are constantly pulling our mind in all sorts of directions. So where does freedom of will lie? Freedom of will lies in the fact that if the vasanas make up our will, but the freedom we have is we are free either to be swayed by any particular vasana or not to be swayed by it. The inclination to eat chocolate arises in your mind. Whether you allow yourself to be swayed by that or not, you have that freedom.
So let me ask you a quick question here. So in my just ordinary experience of suddenly developing a distaste for chocolate, and I see that as saying, oh, I've detached from chocolate, and so my vasana has ended. But that's not true.
It hasn't necessarily ended. It's just but the contrary vasana.
Yes, so I have latched on to an aversion for that, right? And hence substituted that for, like you said, an inclination to just not impact my health negatively.
Yes.
So I see what you're saying. So it's also relating to Bhagavan's teachings about, I guess, the tendency of the ego to latch on from one form to another. I guess vasanas have a similar tendency.
That is vasana. That is
vasana.
Bhagavan says, for example, in verse 25 of Uludunaptu, he describes ego as Uruvatrapeya Hande, the formless phantom or evil spirit ego. So it's formless, it's Uruvatra. But how does it come into existence and stand? He says, Urupatri undam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Urupatri undu mika ongam, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Uruvittu urupatrum, leaving form, it grasps form. So the very, what we have to understand from that is the very nature of ego is grasping form. And whatever forms it grasps, things other than itself, because it itself is formless. So any form it grasps is something other than itself. In other words, what he refers to there as uru, form, is vishayas.
Right.
So it is the ego is not a vishaya vasana, but the very nature of ego is to have vishaya vasanas.
Right. Right.
So because we cannot survive without clinging to form, we as ego cannot survive. So we naturally have very strong inclination to cling to some form or other.
And hence vasanas are the ego's attributes that allows it
Yes.
to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Even if we find ourselves in hell, we are undergoing, whether hell in some other world or hell in this world, supposing we're in a hell-like situation in life. Everything seems to be against us. So our body is racked with disease and so many things. Life is hell, but are we ready to let go? No, we're still not ready to let go, because our desire to survive makes us willing to undergo any amount of hell rather than to let go. So dense is our ajnana, our aviveka.
Yeah. So I understand. So I guess there is no point in kind of just seeing a mental account of, what vasanas I seem to have let go, or detachments. So I guess the ultimate solution is just constantly turning within and giving way to destruction of the seed of the vasana. Correct.
The vasanas are the seeds. The vasanas are the seeds.
The seeds. Yeah, exactly.
That is, we can, if we're trying to rectify vasanas, like we've got a bad habit, eating chocolate. We want to rectify that. We have to try to resist that. Whenever the inclination rises, we try and avoid being swayed by it. In this way, we can try and deal with one by one. But then, instead of, we are replacing the vasana to eat chocolate, in other words, the vasana for self-indulgence, we're replacing with another vasana. I should be healthy. I shouldn't feel sick.
Or I should not eat chocolate. Right?
Yeah. All these are vasanas. So vasanas are constantly ebbing and flowing. So there's no constancy there. But the trouble is, when we replace one vasana with another vasana, suppose we've got some bad vasanas or subha vasanas, we can try and replace them with subha vasanas. Good. But even the subha vasanas are still bondage, because any vasana that draws our attention away from ourselves is a vishaya vasana. And vishaya vasanas are seeds that give rise to action of mind, speech, and body. And the whole, as Bhagavan says, kriti mahodado, patana karanam. What is that? In the Sanskrit verse, he doesn't say what is the cause for falling in that gross ocean of action. But in the Tamil verse, he makes it clear that karanam is the seeds, the vasanas.
I see. Okay.
So merely replacing one vasana with another vasana is replacing our iron chains with golden chains.
Right.
If you try to cultivate, I will have only subha vasanas. I'll try and be a good person, to be kind to people, not to get irritated, to give up all my bad habits and have good habits. That is good, no doubt, but it's still bondage. You're replacing your iron chains with golden chains, but they're still chains.
Yes.
Our aim is to give up all vasanas except for one vasana. The one vasana that can save us is what Bhagavan called Sat-vasana. That is the inclination just to be as we are, to hold on to our being and thereby to be as we are.
Yes. Yes. Okay, Michael. Thank you. That's clear. I just leading on to samskara. So I don't know the relationship with respect to vasanas as you defined it as the seeds. And are these patterns that we tend?
Well, all these terms,
Yeah.
These terms have multiple meanings. Like vasana can mean but vasana comes from vasa. Vasa means to dwell or to reside. So a smell is a vasana. In a flower, a certain beautiful aroma dwells in that. It lingers in that.
If and I think in Tamil it's called vasanai.
Yes, vasanai. Vasanai, that is that A, the final long vowel in Sanskrit becomes A in Tamil. Like Aruna becomes Arunai.
Arunai, right.
But it means, so one of the meanings of vasana is the smell, because it's what lingers there, what resides there.
Right.
Why vasanas are called vasanas is because those inclinations reside there.
Okay.
And the aroma of those vasanas color our whole life. And just like if you've got a beautiful bunch of roses in a room, the whole room is pervaded by that. If you've got whatever vasanas are in the mind, it pervades the whole mind. It like a beautiful aroma or a bad smell, whatever it may be, how it affects the atmosphere. So the mind is affected. That is the origin of the word vasana.
And it's an interesting metaphor to smell. I mean, you can actually relate to that, right?
Yes, exactly.
As you explained, yes.
So just like there are good smells and bad smells, there are subhavasanas and asubhavasanas.
Right.
But whether it's a good smell or a bad smell, it's still a smell.
And yes, and so what are samskaras, Michael?
Samskaras,
are they?
Yeah. That word samskara comes from a different root. I think samskara means what is well formed, or something like that.
So it's like a pattern,
or
a habit.
Well, but as I say, words are used in different sense in different contexts. So samskaras also can mean certain rituals and things can be called samskaras. These words have many different meanings, but the sense in which vasanas is used in Bhagavan's teaching is this. Bhagavan generally doesn't use the word samskaras. Okay. Sometimes he does if he's asked about them, but we can take it. But samskara is a synonym for vasana.
Okay.
That doesn't mean all the meanings of samskara are also meanings of vasana or vice versa. No, but the sense in which they're used in a spiritual context, it means the same. It means those inclinations.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that is clarifying because
there's a lot of confusion about these words. You will find if you look in dictionaries or if you read books on Vedanta, both vasanas and samskaras are often explained as being memories or impressions.
Right.
That is not the correct meaning, or that is not the deeper meaning. The deeper meaning, the sense in which the deeper sense in which it's used in Vedanta, it's not impressions, it's inclinations.
Right. And then they reside more permanently, right, as part of our, I guess, Karana Sharira, or
they are
specifically within our
there is no Karana Sharira other than vasanas. Vasanas are what constitute vas. That is, the Karana Sharira is what is otherwise called the Anandamaya Kosha or the Chittam.
Okay.
It is the will. It is the totality of all the vasanas is what makes up the Anandamaya Kosha or Karana Sharira.
Right. And hence they have a more sort of a permanent existence as compared to memories, right?
Yeah, memories belong to Manamaya Kosha. Right. They're superficial.
Right. Yes. Okay. Okay. I think that's clear. And I guess
but if you read books on Vedanta, you will often, whether you read English translations or even if you read Sanskrit commentaries, often they explain Chittam as being memory. That is completely a misunderstanding. Chittam means will, not memory. It is the vasanas, not the memories that make up the Chittam.
Right.
But
think that
because
is clear.
the memories come from a past and the vasanas come from a past, so there's that confusion.
Right, right. And you've explained that very clearly, Michael, in your satsang. So
Yes.
I think that is clear. Okay. Yeah, I think in my mind, I was still confused about what samskaras or vasanas was,
Yes.
but I think essentially they are the same.
Essentially,
And their
they're the same.
destruction are again turning within, right?
Yes.
That's the only way to get rid of,
Yes.
destroy them permanently.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the term samskara, it is used in Vedanta, but it's more commonly used in Buddhism.
I
But I
see.
think in Buddhism, when they talk of samskaras, they're talking about much the same that we are talking about when we talk about vasanas. Or when samskaras are talked about in Vedanta, it's a synonym for vasanas. So I don't think we need to consider samskaras separately. We can, and
Understood.
as I say, the term Bhagavan generally used was vasana.
Yeah, vasana.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. Okay. So I think, Michael, this is another topic that I've heard many devotees discuss, and it's also something that I would like to understand a little bit more clearly. And this pertains to just operating in the world, in our, living our daily existence, but with the clear light of Bhagavan's teachings, and and just being able to, deal with emotions, feelings, and I guess the vasanas where they want to go, and constantly striving to attend to ourselves under all circumstances that life
Yes.
throws at us. And I think I just wanted to have a deeper discussion about this. I don't have a specific question per se, but I think this is the question is, again, how do you apportion your attention to what you perceive or what must be done, your duty, or what your mind wants to prioritize in your work or daily activity, and then and to what extent do you turn within, and I know you say this, that, and Bhagavan's teaching says this, that this has to be preferably like a continuous activity, no matter what you're doing, because
Yeah.
the body, mind, and is doing its job,
Yeah.
and let it do that. But I'm trying to get a little bit more practical advice on this topic,
Okay.
and get a sense of, and ask this because I find my peace wavering from time to time, and there are periods where I see great sense of restfulness and peace, and attributing that and being able to go back and within a lot more, and then suddenly just right after that there is a lapse right again.
Yeah.
And so it wavers a lot, and so I'm trying to see how do I sustain the sadhana, and hold on to that, right, in a more in a practical way, and as I discharge my duties, and
Right.
as this person that I am.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. What you say applies to all of us.
Right.
It is the nature of the mind to be fickle, to waver. We need not be overly concerned about this. So long as we must rise as ego, we have to live with this, because this is the nature of ego. But the key to following Bhagavan's path is bhakti, love.
Yeah.
As Bhagavan said, bhakti is the mother of jnana.
Mm.
Our attention naturally goes towards what interests us, what we like. If we're interested in politics, we'll often be following the news and seeing what's happening, and debating with people whether which party is better or who's a better leader, and all these things. If that's what interests us. If we're interested in football, that's the subject that will be occupying our attention. If we're interested in cricket, that will be occupying our attention. If we're interested in philosophy, we'll always be thinking about philosophical problems. If we're interested in science, we'll be wanting to read up about the latest discoveries. And so but the mind naturally goes towards what interests it. That is, our attention is driven by love, by liking. So whatever subject we like to think about that subject. So whatever we may be doing in the day, our mind is naturally dwelling on those things that interest us, those things that appeal to us. So we all have certain work to do. That as long as there's a body, but obviously to sustain this body, work of some form is required. Even if we're retired, we still need to go to the shops, do shopping, pay the bills, and we may have social commitments and so many things. So everyone's life has certain commitments, certain things we have to do. But whether we may be very, very poor, having to work 18 hours a day to maintain ourselves and our family. But even in the midst of that, our mind will still be dwelling on the things that interest us, the things we like, the things that concern us. So the mind goes towards that which it is concerned about, that which it loves, that which it likes, that which it finds interesting. So our mind will go within to the extent to which we love to know ourselves, to the extent to which we are interested to know ourselves, to the extent to which we're curious to know, who am I? To the extent to which that's our greatest concern in life. All our problems are caused by not knowing ourselves. So if we really have understood Bhagavan properly, there's nothing that will interest us more than this finding the answer to this simple question, who am I? And to find that answer, we're not going to find it in books or by going outward. We can find it only in our own heart. In the book of only by reading the book of our own heart, by looking deep within ourselves, can we find the answer to this question. So it's love is the key. If there's love, our mind will automatically be going within. If there's a deficiency of love, our mind will be going outwards. So most of us are in the position, we have a little interest, a little liking, a little love to follow this path. But we still have so much concern about the external life, about the world, about our life in this world, and so many things. So our aim should be to wean our mind off its interest in all other things and to cultivate interest, passionate love to know who am I. What is the most effective means to do so is by the practice. That is, the love comes to the extent to which we practice it. The practice can be supported by reading about Bhagavan's teachings, thinking about his teachings, keeping our mind dwelling on his teachings, because his teachings are constantly reminding us to look back within. So we are not reading Bhagavan's teachings correctly. We're not doing the Sravana correctly or the Manana correctly if it doesn't prompt us to turn our mind within. Mm-hmm. So the key to following Bhagavan's path is practice. The key to what drives the practice is the love. How to cultivate the love? By practice. So we can't get away from the absolute need for love and the need for practice. But the love will drive us to practice, and the practice will cultivate the love. So these two have to go hand in hand.
Right. Yeah, I think, I mean, like I said, it seems to happen personally for me in some sort of, like I said, there are sustained periods where I can do this more effectively, and then there seems to be a lapse.
Yeah. And this is the nature of the mind.
Okay. Yeah. I understand.
But we shouldn't yield ourselves to the nature of the mind. We are trying to yield ourselves, surrender ourselves to our real nature. which is ever stable being. So however much the mind is fickle and takes us outwards, we need to try and bring it back within.
Yeah, and
so whether we're going through a good period or a bad period, we should still be trying to hold on to this practice.
So, Michael, the means of cultivating bhakti, that seems to be dependent on our own individual inclinations or personality, right? So, so it could be, people driven through rituals, or like you said, through Shravana, Manana, or and constant studying. So, do you recommend that this is something that we also investigate as to what is the best way of doing this, or it's just by just constantly just turning within, it'll just become evident, right? The bhakti or the ways to cultivate bhakti will become evident for each person as we are. So
bhakti simply means love. But love, not the love we have for the world. It right. implies the love towards God. So first, when bhakti begins growing, it's not even very pure bhakti. That is, when we first begin worshipping God. But if you go to temples or mosques or churches or synagogues or gurudwaras, but the vast majority of people who go to such places of worship, why are they going there? They are going there, but they have some faith in God. They have some, they believe that by going to these places, by worshipping God according to whatever the rituals of their particular religion may be, this is the way to, this is a means to fulfill their desires and to remove their difficulties. Whether the desires are desires about having a better life here and now, or a better life afterwards, whether whatever be our belief about afterlife, whether we believe that after death we go to heaven or to hell, or whether we believe that we have to be born again, whatever our beliefs may be, we want a good life now and a good life hereafter. That is the natural human condition. So God is a means to an end. We worship God for what we can get from God. And if God doesn't give us what we want, if God gives us difficulties, we get angry. Oh, what's God to do? What wrong have I done? Why God is punishing me? This is the immature state of mind. But as we go on, and it's better to worship God for the fulfillment of desires, but to try and fulfill our desires by the principle of might is right, by our external effort. So it's better. At least we are disciplining ourselves a certain amount. If we go to a church every Sunday, or we go to a mosque every Friday, or a temple every whatever it is. So it's better to try to, if we want to fulfill our desires, it's better to depend on God for the fulfillment of our desires, because the more we worship God, in order to fulfill our desires, the more we will thereby slowly gain the maturity to understand, rather than asking God for this or that, if God is able to give me all these things I want, surely God is greater than anything he can give me. So why should I be asking God for, it's like going to an immensely wealthy person and begging for some trinkets. Rather than begging for these trinkets, why don't I love God for his own sake? So the bhakti gradually matures from being kamya bhakti to nishkamya bhakti. And nishkamya bhakti, in the early stages, when we want to express our love for God, when our love becomes for God alone, not for what we can get from God, but from God alone, that is nishkamya bhakti. That is what Bhagavan talks about from verse 3 to verse 3 onwards in Upadesha Indira. So he says, by nishkarmya karma done for God, that means implies for the love of God, that purifies the mind and shows the way to liberation. How does it show the way to liberation? But to the extent that the mind is purified, it gets the clarity to understand what is the way to liberation. The way to liberation is not doing any karma, because as he said in the previous verse, vidu tarale, karma does not give liberation. And in Sanskrit, he says, gati nirodhakam, it obstructs the liberation. So karma is not the means, but karma can be a means to purify the mind. So what are the means by which we can purify the mind? What are the actions we can do to purify the mind? The nishkarmiya karmas we can do. We can do actions by body, by speech, and by mind. In this order, each one is more efficacious than the previous one. So better than worshipping God by body is worshipping by speech. Better than worshipping by speech is worshipping by mind. That's what Bhagavan says in the 4th verse. Didam we do puja, japamam, dhyanamam, udulbak, udulbak ulum toril undipara, I can't remember the exact word, but each one is better than the previous one. And then he devotes a verse to each one. So in verse 5, Ennuru yavam ireyuru amena, eni vari padalundi para, isan nalpusane undi para. Worshipping any form, taking it to be a form of God, that is, God is said to be Ashtamurti. What are the Ashtamurtis? What are those 8? It is the 5 elements, sun, moon, and sometimes it said jiva, sometimes it said sacrificial, the priest who does the sacrifice. But whatever it is, it covers everything.
Right.
So taking anything to be a form of God, worshipping appropriately, that means you can do ritual worship, or you can, for example, you see a poor person, a hungry person, you give, taking that person to be God. If you offer them food, that is good worship of God.
Right.
If you see the damage that is being done to the environment, and how we're causing global warming, trying to live a more eco-friendly life with the attitude that all this world is God, that is also good worship of God.
Right.
So Bhagavan gives an extremely broad definition of worship. So anything we do by body with the attitude that we are doing it for the sake of God, we're doing it for the love of God, is good worship of God. Then he talks.
Hence, so hence choosing our ways and means to live, for example, right? They can just be all means to worship God, right?
Yes,
what choices we make as we live,
even simple things
how we
in life.
treat people, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even a smile, smiling at someone, saying a kind word to someone, listening to someone patiently if they're telling you about their troubles. These are all, if you do it with the attitude that you're doing this for the love of God, these are all good worship of God.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Then in the next verse, verse 6, he talks about japa. And he says, rather than hymns of praise, japa done aloud is good. Rather than japa done aloud, is japa done softly within the mouth. Rather than japa done softly in the mouth, the mental japa is good. That is a form of dhyana. So he's pointing out the more and more subtle things. The more subtle an action, the more effectivity is a means of purifying the mind. If it is done without desire, nishkarmiya, and for the love of God.
Right. And I guess the subtlest is turning within. Right.
Wait. Don't jump the horse. We haven't done meditation yet. The next one, he talks about meditation. Verse 7, he talks about meditation. And he says, rather than the interrupted meditation, the uninterrupted meditation is good.
Right.
Why is that? Because if you sit down to meditate on God, to meditate on either a name or form of God, if you start thinking about other things, how am I going to pay the bills? What am I going to do when I go to office tomorrow? If other thoughts come and occupy your mind, that means you have more concern about those other things than you have love for God.
Right.
If you have love for God, then your meditation on God will be uninterrupted. So
Right.
the more our mind is fixed on God, and it's fixed on love as a result, on God as a result of love, the more efficacious it is in purifying the mind. So
Right.
up to verse 7, he's talking about nishkarmiya karma.
Mhm.
In verse 8 is where he turns from nishkarmiya karma to turning within and just being as we are. What he says in verse 8 is, rather than anya bhava. Anya bhava here, anya means what is other. Anya bhava in this context means meditating on God as something other than ourselves.
Right.
Avanahamahum ananya bhava me. The ananya bhava, the meditation on him as not other than ourselves, with the understanding that he is I.
Right.
Anaitanam uttamam. That is the best of
The
all.
best. Yeah.
What does he mean, best of all? Firstly, it is it's the best way of worshipping God.
Okay.
So it's the best form of bhakti. It is the most efficacious means to purify the mind. So all the spiritual sadhanas we could do, meditating on ourself with the understanding that God is that which is shining in our heart as ourself, as I, that is the best of all. And what happens as a result of that turning the mind within to meditate on ourselves? Baba Balatinal Bhavanatita Sabhavatirutale Para Parabhakti Tattvamundi Para. That is, by the strength of that Baba, that means the Ananya Baba, the self-attentiveness, by the strength of that self-attentiveness, being in a Sat Baba, the state of being, that is Bhavanatita. There, bhavana means meditation in the form of mental activity. That is, attending to anything other than ourselves is a mental activity. So if you're meditating on God as a name and form, that is bhavana in that sense.
Right.
When you meditate on yourself and thereby be as you are, that is, as a result of meditating on ourselves, the ego was formerly rising to meditate on God, subsides back within and remains in the state of being. That is transcending bhavana. That goes beyond the bhavana, beyond the mental activity. And that, Bhagavan says, is parabhakti tattva. That is the true supreme devotion. So just being as we are, as a result of self-attentiveness, is parabhakti.
That is very clear, Michael. Thank you.
Well,
And
thanks, Bhagavan. Bhagavan has put it so clearly in Upadesh Undiyar.
yes.
So people say, oh, Bhagavan has approved all spiritual paths. But see, in Upadesh Undiyar, he mentioned puja, japa, and dhyana. Yes, he mentions them all, but he puts them all in context. And he talks about the relative efficacy of these. Best of all is Ananya Bhava, because only by Ananya Bhava can we remain in our state of being, and that alone, that state in which we subside in our state of being. In verse 10, he summarizes the whole thing. Udita idatil odungi iratal. Subsiding and being in the place from which we rose, that is karma and bhakti, that is yoga and jnana.
Right. Yes, and also as a practitioner, it's best to find out for oneself what is the path to get before you do the full meditating on the self, right? So you don't recommend doing the meditation on with the ananya bhava as sort of like the beginner step, right? As in, so do you recommend that one must go through or pick these multiple stages and then eventually do that? Or
the very fact that we've been drawn to Bhagavan's path and we're attracted to Bhagavan's path means we've already been through all these other stages. We don't have to go back now.
No, my question really as a sadhana, Michael, which means so if I consider myself to say a beginner, right? Then should I focus more on doing like the japa, with in a mental japa, or the bhava, meditation, right, on mentally, or the ananya bhava, which is just being as you are, right? So do you recommend that, or
Bhagavan
I'm
said,
trying to
Bhagavan said, even a little effort made towards self-attentiveness is worth crores of efforts made in any other path. This is so much more effective. Even if we're only able to be self-attentive for a few moments here and there throughout the day, that is of far greater value than hours and hours and hours spent doing japa or dhyana or anything else.
Okay.
This is the supremely efficacious path. That Bhagavan put it so strongly when he says, "Anatinam uttamam," it is the best among all.
Okay,
So
and you don't have to
rather than
qualify.
spending any effort doing other things,
Okay.
why not? Whatever effort we can put into doing sadhana, why not put that effort into trying to turn within?
Right, and that can be done, right, for a beginner. That's what I'm trying to
Yes,
understand. You don't have to progress to that stage.
No.
Right,
The very
okay.
fact that we are attracted to Bhagavan's teaching, the very fact that we are now talking about this, or if people watch this on YouTube afterwards, when we put it on YouTube, if the very fact that they're watching this means they already have an interest in this. If they weren't interested in this, they'd be watching other videos on japa or puja or whatever it is. The very fact that they are drawn to watch videos that are talking about Bhagavan's teachings, or the very fact that we like to read Bhagavan's teachings, the very fact that we are attracted to Bhagavan, all that shows we've already been through all these things.
Okay.
If we hadn't been through all these things, we wouldn't be so strongly attracted to Bhagavan.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, Michael, I just want to
just say one more thing, because you part of this question was operating in the world with wisdom and peace in the light of Bhagavan's teaching. So regarding operating in the world, this is a very simple matter. Bhagavan has told us whatever is to happen in our life is already predetermined. That is the outward course of our life. Everything that is to happen to us, everything we are to experience is determined by prarabdha. That doesn't mean, as some people wrongly infer, but all our actions are therefore according to prarabdha. That is not the case. Some of our actions are according to prarabdha, because in order to experience what we are destined to experience, some role is to be played by our mind, speech, and body. Mm-hmm. So an example I often give, if you're destined to be a doctor, in order to be a doctor, you have to study and you have to pass the exams and everything. So you will be made to do those actions. But just because actions we are made to do in accordance with prarabdha, doesn't mean that it is not agamya. Mm-hmm. Because most of the actions we do, even those actions we're made to do, if we're studying hard to become a doctor, it's highly unlikely that we would study hard to become a doctor without any liking to become a doctor.
Right.
Why we want to become a doctor, it may vary from person to person. Some people may want to become doctors because they think it's a good way of serving humanity, of doing good to other people. So because they like the idea of a caring profession, a profession where they can help people. That's the reason why some people want to become doctors. Other people want to become doctors because it's a prestigious profession. If you're a doctor, you've got a certain status in society. It's also you can earn a lot of money as a doctor. So people may have different reasons, but almost everyone who studies to become a doctor does so because they have some desire to become a doctor. So like that, many of the actions we do in life, that's a big thing. That is, becoming a doctor, obviously that's a major thing in one's life. But it's down to the smallest thing. If it's your destiny to eat a tasty meal today, you may have to cook it yourself, or at least you have to go to a restaurant and sit down and order it, or Even if someone serves it to you, you still have to put it in your mouth. So there are actions we have to do to experience even the smallest things in our prarabdha. That's why when Devaraja Mudliya asked Bhagavan, if is my picking up the fan and fanning myself, is even that according to prarabdha? Bhagavan said yes. Why? Because fanning yourself isn't your experience. Why do we fan ourselves? To experience a cool breeze.
Right.
If it was not our destiny to experience that cool breeze, we couldn't pick up that fan. We may want to, but something would obstruct us. We pick up the fan and it would break or something. Something would prevent us. So prarabdha, so many of our actions, probably you can say the majority of our actions are to some extent or other driven by prarabdha. But the
including the desire to be attracted to Bhagavan's teachings and to want to persevere, right? I mean, that too is part of prarabdha.
I know that it's our prarabdha to have been brought to Bhagavan's path. But our liking to follow Bhagavan's path, that is not prarabdha. Likes and dislikes are not according to prarabdha.
Right.
Prarabdha, primarily prarabdha, it's the fruit of past actions. The fruit means it's what we have to experience.
Right.
So the actions we do in order to experience, those actions are not prarabdha. As Bhagavan says, avarava prarabdha prakaram. In accordance with the prarabdha, Adakarnavam, God, Angangirantu, being there, that means being in the heart of each one of them, Atma-vichara will make them act.
Yeah.
So it's not prarabdha that is making us act, it is God who is making us act in accordance with our prarabdha.
Right.
So we can, so the prarabdha is just what we experience. But our likes and dislikes, our will, that is entirely separate. That is the will is mati, the prarabdha is vidhi. Vidhi and mati. They're two distinct things.
So destiny versus our will, right?
Yeah. So how we use our will determines the actions we do.
Yeah.
That is, though many actions are done in accordance with prarabdha, our actions are also being driven by our vāsanās.
Right.
So the actions we do under the sway of our vāsanās are agamya.
Right.
Those agamya are the actions that bear fruit. The fruit gets stored in sanchita, and from which Bhagavan then selects which fruit are appropriate for us to experience in each lifetime.
As prarabdhas.
As prarabdha, exactly.
Right.
So our life is entirely that everything that we are to experience, everything that is to happen to us in this life is determined by prarabdha. So if we are to be married and to have children, it will happen. It's already predetermined. And if we are to work and to earn a living and provide for our family, that's already predetermined. The truth is, we do not need to give an iota of attention to any of these things because they're already determined according to prarabdha. That's why Bhagavan says in the 13th paragraph of Nana, when that one Parameshwara Shakti, that supreme power, ruling power of God, is driving all karyas. Karyas there means everything that is meant to happen, everything that ought to happen, everything we're meant to do, everything we ought to do.
Yeah.
It's all being driven by him. So he said, when that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? The implication is that we do not need to think about these things at all. Because how he started that paragraph, in the first sentence he says, Anma chintane tavira, vera chintane kalambavatuku, satram idam kodamal, apmanishta paranai iripade, tanai isanaku alipadam. That is, being apmanishta paran, one who is firmly established as oneself. How to be firmly established as oneself? He is not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than Atma-chintana. Atma-chintana means self-attentiveness. So, in other words, what Bhagavan implies there is being so keenly self-attentive, but we thereby give no room to the rising of other thoughts. That is, if we are so keenly self-attentive, that is what he refers to in verse 9 of Upadesh Undiyar, Bhava Balatina, by the strength of that self-attentiveness, being in the state of, in Sat Bhava, the state of being, which transcends bhavana, transcends mental activity. So to the extent to which we are self-attentive, we are thereby giving no room to the rising of other thoughts, and thereby we are remaining firmly established in ourselves. And that is Tanne Isanuku Alipadam. That is giving ourselves to God. So the implication of the first sentence is, if we want to give ourselves to God, we need to be so keenly self-attentive, we don't give room to rising of any other thoughts. But how can that be? I've got so much responsibility. I've got a husband or a wife, and I've got 10 children. I'm a breadwinner. I've got to earn. I've got to pay the bills. I've got this. I've got that. How can I remain without thinking of anything? Bhagavan answers that doubt in the next sentence. However much burden is placed on God, he will bear all of it. In the context, it implies even the burden of thinking about all these things, leave that burden to him. He will take care of all these things. Then he says, when that one Parameshwara Shakti is driving all karyas, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? In other words, Bhagavan is telling us, even the burden of thinking, give it to God. He will take care of everything. That's why he concludes by giving that beautiful analogy, just like the passenger traveling on a train. When we're traveling on a train, we know the train is carrying all the burden. So why should we carry our luggage on our head?
It is a very, very simple, beautiful, and very effective analogy. And
yes,
it also brings a smile on your face, when
yes.
you think about it, and you immediately realize that,
yeah.
right?
And if we carefully observe the words Bhagavan there uses there, he says, Kashtabada, ain Kashtabada Vendam. Why should we suffer carrying the burden on our head instead of sukhamai, happily, peacefully, calmly, comfortably,
enjoying the
putting it
journey
aside and traveling? So the more we surrender all thought about the world, all thought about our love to God, all thought about our life to God, the happier we will be. So the truth is, all we need to do is to attend to ourselves. If we attend to ourselves, everything else will be taken care of by grace. He has given us that assurance. Clearly, he implies that there. So if we think, oh, yes, okay, I'll surrender myself a little, but I need to think about this, still I need to think about that. It's okay. It's good to surrender as much as we can, but the surrender is not complete until we think about nothing else other than our own being, other than Atma-chintana. There should be no other thought at all. In other words, our mind should be wholly turned within and merged at his feet.
Right.
That is surrender. That is vichara.
Right. And that too is not really a thought. It's just
yes,
being, right?
It
just
is
abiding.
Metaphorically, because the attention we direct to anything other than ourselves is a thought.
Right.
So metaphorically, Bhagavan refers to the attention to ourselves as Atma-chintana.
Right.
A few paragraphs earlier, he described it as Swarupa Dhyana, meditation on oneself. Meditation means thinking, but it's not thinking. It is just attending to ourselves and thereby being as we are.
Right. Yeah,
it's a metaphorical way of saying it. Just like in the 6th paragraph, he says, just like the stick used for stirring the funeral pyre, the thought, who am I, destroying all other thoughts, will in the end be destroyed. What he means there by the thought, who am I? People think you have to go on thinking, who am I, who am I, who am I? That's
right,
not
it's not.
It's a metaphorical way of saying self-attentiveness. But thought, who am I, means attending to ourselves to see who we actually are.
Right. Thank you, Michael. Michael, do you have time for one more question?
Oh, yes, certainly.
Okay, and this kind of goes back to the first question I asked about the ego in the world
Yeah,
in the context of awakening.
yeah,
But I kind of wanted to understand that in the sense of the term pralaya, which is often used in texts,
yeah.
right, ancient texts, and again the concept of cycles or yuga, and then the dissolution in pralaya. And are these mental states? And I mean, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
understand
Okay.
how does
Uh,
this fall in the context of Bhagavan's teachings. Did he have any?
okay. But firstly, there are religions give different teachings at different levels to suit people at different levels of spiritual development. So these talk about the 4 yugas and everything. These are not the deepest teachings. These are more suited to people at earlier stages of the spiritual path. However, we can give a more spiritual interpretation to these. I mean, they can be the interpretation I will give now is not the only interpretation. Other people may interpret it differently, and their interpretation will be perfectly valid from their perspective. But from the perspective of Bhagavan's teachings, I can't remember what the 4 yugas are. It begins with Satya Yuga, and then that it begins from the very best yuga, where everyone is righteous and it's a sort of heavenly world. And then the next yuga is
Treta
a little
Yuga.
and
Treta,
now
okay.
we're in Kali Yuga, the
Treta.
worst of all.
Yeah.
I would
Kapar and Kali.
suggest, this is just, when I read your question, this idea came to me. That is, when our minds are strongly outward going, we believe that we can get the pleasure, the happiness we are seeking from the world.
Mhm.
So the world, we may not get it, but we see the prospect in the world. We think the world is a place full of so much potential pleasure. So it all looks very rosy when we are in an immature state of mind. As our mind becomes more and more pure, we recognize the defective nature of the world. But yes, we do get a little pleasure here and there, but that pleasure is mixed up with so much pain. So we may start off with a very rosy picture of life. It's true, even as a child, we can see it in our own life. Probably when we're children, children have different experiences. But supposing we are born in a happy family, a family that has that is got material security and loving parents and everything, we probably start off life with a fairly rosy picture of life. We through the innocent eyes of a child, life may look very bright. But as we grow up, as we become teenagers, we begin to face so many difficulties at school, difficulties within ourselves, our own emotions and things. And then when we grow up and we are in our 20s and 30s, we got all the pressures of firstly of studying and then of working and all these things. So, and as we get older, we look back on life, how quickly it's all rushed past.
Right.
And all the rosy pictures we may have started off with, we've now got a far more realistic picture of life. So it's a bit like that. In the same way with our spiritual development, when we are immature, we may think that there's so much prospect of happiness in this world. If I can amass wealth, I'll be happy. If I can become very powerful, if I can become president of the United States, or if I can be a king or an emperor or dictator, or what, then I'll be happy. Or if I become a Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk and have billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, I'll be happy. So the immature mind will believe that there's happiness out there in the world. It won't actually get it, but it will believe it. Even when you become president of the United States, even when you have $1 billion or $100 billion or whatever, you're still not going to be satisfied. But the mind is under the illusion that Happiness lies out there. I can get it. So that is perhaps depicted by Satya Yuga. As we mature, we begin to understand happiness doesn't lie in all these things. So the world looks a little less rosy. And as we get more and more mature, we see more and more the shortcomings of life. Life doesn't seem so beautiful. The external life doesn't seem so beautiful. So that's when we begin to turn within more. So one possible interpretation is that those 4 yugas are talking about the progressive stages of the maturing of the mind, where our outlook on the external world changes. The external world no longer looks a place of offering us unlimited pleasure. We know that whatever little pleasure we get from this world is very limited, very fleeting, very unsatisfactory. So we begin to go deeper and deeper within. That's one way of interpreting it.
So they are really mental states in some sense,
We
right?
can say, yes, we can say. But there may be other perfectly valid ways of interpreting it, because these are, or some people may take it literally true. At one time, it was all a wonderful Garden of Eden. Everything
and what's
was perfect
interesting,
it's there in all religions in one form or another, the fall of man.
Right, Michael, but what's interesting is also the role of time, right? How it is delineated in these yugas, and to the precision of 26,000 years or whatever. Yuga. And it's always interesting and curious to see where did this come from, right? This kind of breaking it down and into this type of linear time, and there's a sense of despair when you hear, like, we've just only entered the Kali Yuga, right? I mean, of course, like as you say, you don't have to pay attention to that, if you. But I was just curious about that, and wondering why is there's so much detail and attention given to that.
So if this is just the beginning of Kali Yuga and it's going to get progressively worse, you can imagine how bad it's going to get. So better we get out of this soon.
and it's glad that we have a way to deal with that despair, right? And have a path through Bhagavan's teachings. So okay, and okay, so
regarding pralaya,
right?
Pralaya is the world, as Bhagavan says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So pralaya ultimately means the
destruction of ego. Right, yeah.
That is why Shiva is the killer. Shiva in the form of Arunachala, in the form of Arunachala Ramana, the sole purpose of Arunachala, the sole purpose of Bhagavan Ramana is the annihilation of ego, because only by annihilation of ego can you bring about the ultimate pralaya.
Pralaya, right. Makes sense, yeah. All right, thank you, Michael. I want to thank you again, and I'm grateful for your time and, helping me deepen my understanding in the context of these questions. So
well, it's not, I'm not doing anything. This is all Bhagavan. Bhagavan has given us these things. And even some ideas, like this idea about these yugas. I just got the idea before we had this meeting. I thought I should just read through your questions. And then that idea occurred to me. So where did that idea come from? It can come only from Bhagavan. So when we see through the eyes of Bhagavan's teachings, he will give us so many ideas how to explain these things.
Right. And to also, kind of turn our mind in curiosity as well in attending to that, right? And seeking solace in the teaching, as opposed to giving into the despair that you're constantly,
if we look outwards,
outside,
things are pretty bleak.
Yes, it is so, yeah.
Because there's one thing, if we look outwards, we have a body. And there's one thing that is absolutely sure. One thing that is, the one certainty in this life is death.
Right.
If we are born, we're going to die. So it's pretty bleak if we look outward. But if we look within, what we actually are is an infinite ocean, infinite space of pure happiness, pure love.
Right.
So
Well,
it's
on that
better to
great
look within
note,
than to look outside.
so that's a wonderful note to end this conversation.
Right.
And thank you,
Okay, well,
Michael.
thank you very
And
much.
Om Namo Bhagavate.
Om Namo
Sri
Bhagavate.
Arunachalam. Thank you.
Thank you.